Welcome to the regular Faroes News Report.
It is Sunday, February 8th, 2026.
We're back to guide you through the week's events from the Faroe Islands. And it's been quite a week.
It really has. We're seeing these big questions bubble up again. Sovereignty, the economy, social policy. It's all being debated pretty intensely.
Absolutely. So let's run through the headlines we'll be covering. In the news segment, we'll start with a Danish proposal on immigration and deportation.
And that ties into some high-profile political visits to Tórshavn and Klaksvík that are happening this week.
Then we have a parliamentary inquiry into wage negotiations. This is the whole kroner versus percentages debate.
Plus, a new government plan to regulate short-term holiday rentals, which, has the industry talking.
And not in the way you'd expect. Also in the news, a debate around the WHO and national sovereignty. And finally, a cultural note about a new statue for William Gibson Sloane unveiled in Tórshavn today.
Then for the opinion section, we'll look at a defense of humanitarian aid for the broadcaster SAT-7.
And a critique of the fast-track integration system, arguing it might actually be a barrier.
We'll also cover an urgent call for higher HPV vaccination rates for young people.
And to round it out, a warning from the Union Party about the potential economic costs of independence.
Okay, let's get straight into the news.
Right. Let's start with that first story. The immigration debate in Denmark seems to be creating some ripples in the Faroes.
It is. This is all coming from a proposal by Bjørn Brandenborg of the Danish Social Democrats. He's pushing for a much stricter deportation policy.
Stricter in what way?
The proposal is for automatic deportation if a foreign national gets a prison sentence of 1 year or more.
And the really key detail here, the part that's causing the controversy, is that it would apply regardless of family ties, correct?
Precisely. That is the big shift. The proposal says deportation should happen even if it goes against family connections or, human rights conventions that have stopped these things in the past.
So that buffer, having a family in the country, would just be gone.
For serious crimes, yes. That's the argument. And to make his case, Brandenborg pointed to a specific, very troubling incident.
From Odense, I believe.
Yes. The report details a case where a taxi driver was convicted of sexually assaulting a young woman. A terrible ordeal. He got a year in prison and a warning of deportation, but he wasn't actually deported.
Why not?
Because of his family ties in Denmark. The European Convention on Human Rights protected him. Brandenborg is using this as the prime example of a broken system.
And this isn't just a debate happening over in Copenhagen, it's coming here.
It is. Sjur Skal has invited Brandenborg and his colleague Fredrik Vod to the Faroes. They're due in Tórshavn on Monday and Klaksvík on Tuesday.
And what's the official reason for the visit?
To discuss what the Faroes can learn from Danish immigration policy. Specifically, the agenda mentions protecting democratic values against what they're calling Islamism.
It will be very interesting to see how that's received. Okay, let's move on to the domestic labor market. There's a debate brewing that sounds technical, but is, really significant for a lot of people.
The old kroner versus percentages fight. It sounds dry, but it's about how much money ends up in people's pockets.
Exactly. This is from a written inquiry by MP Annika Olsen to Ruth Vang, the finance minister. She's asking how the next round of public sector wage negotiations will be handled.
Will raises be in percentages? Or a flat kroner amount for everyone?
Right. And for anyone not deep in labor economics, let's break down why that matters so much. Why is Olsen focused on percentages?
Well, the source material gives some history here. The current wage gap in the public sector actually goes all the way back to a wage reform in 1969. And since then, it's mostly been percentage-based raises.
And that just widens the gap over time.
It does. If a high earner and a low earner both get a 2% raise, the high earner's raise is much, much bigger in actual cash. The gap grows every single year.
And there was a recent move to try and fix this, wasn't there?
There was a 47 million DKK wage lift, specifically for groups like pedagogues and health workers. Olsen's point is that if the next deal goes back to percentages, all that progress gets wiped out almost immediately.
She's basically asking the minister to protect that investment by sticking to flat kroner raises.
A really critical point for the unions. Okay, let's shift to housing and tourism. A new government proposal on regulating things like Airbnb.
Yes, this could affect a lot of homeowners. What's the plan?
The government wants to give municipalities the power to set their own caps. So, the local council in Tórshavn could decide how many days a year a property can be rented to tourists, and Klaksvík could set a different limit.
A decentralized approach, but the industry reaction seems, Counterintuitive.
It's fascinating. The Employers Association and the Tourism Association both came out and said the proposal is too lenient. They want stricter rules.
They're asking for more red tape.
They are. They have three specific demands. First, make the municipal rules mandatory, not optional, for consistency.
Okay.
Second, they want a single statutory hard cap on rental days for the whole country. And third, and this is probably the biggest one for them, they want a central registry for all holiday rentals.
And the goal there is fair competition, I assume.
Exactly. They want to make sure everyone is paying their taxes and that the market is fair for hotels and other regulated businesses. They see this as closing a loophole in the gray market.
A very clear position from them. Okay, on to public health and a question of sovereignty, this one involving the World Health Organization.
Yes, this was a parliamentary question from Jenis Avrana of the Centre Party to Margit Skora, the Minister of Health.
And this really gets at the heart of who makes the rules for the Faroes.
It does. Rana's concern is about the WHO's structure, that it's privately funded and lacks, democratic accountability. He's worried the international health regulations, the IHR, bind the Faroes too tightly.
That decisions from Geneva automatically become law here.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And the minister's answer gave this really interesting bit of bureaucratic history.
This is where it gets good.
She confirmed that IHR regulations were implemented here in 2011, but she explained how. Back in 2006, Danish authorities sent a formal letter to the Faroes government asking for their position on the regulations.
And the Faroes' response was?
There wasn't one. They never sent a reply.
It just ignored it.
Essentially, yes. And in that kind of administrative world, the Danes interpreted silence as consent. So because no objection was ever filed, the regulations were adopted by default.
A real lesson there. Silence implies consent. Okay, finally for our news segment, a cultural update from Tórshavn today.
Yes, a new memorial statue was unveiled today, Sunday, February 8th.
This is for William Gibson Sloane.
Correct. The statue is by the artist Hans Pauli Olsen, and it's at Sloane's house at Tinghusveien 10. For context, Sloane was born in Scotland, came to the Faroes in 1865, and he founded the Plymouth Brethren movement.
The Brewing, a huge part of Faroe society.
A massive part.
Yeah.
So this statue is a really significant recognition of his influence on the island's religious landscape.
Indeed. All right, let's move into our opinion segment. And just a reminder, we're summarizing arguments made in the media this week. These aren't our views.
And we start with foreign aid, specifically a grant that's been under fire from the media outlet Fredsbrevet.
Right. This is a defense written by Jakob Brusa from the Church Home Mission. The issue is a 300,000 DKK government grant to the organization SAT7. Fredsbrevet basically implied this was tax money being used for missionary work.
And Brusa is pushing back hard on that characterization.
Very hard. He argues the aid is for a specific humanitarian project called Hope and Empowerment for the Next Generation. He's really drawing a line, saying it's not about proselytizing.
And he gives specific examples of what the money is for.
He does. He highlights satellite schooling for Afghan girls who are banned from education. The programs are broadcast in the Dari language. He also mentions the My School programs in Arabic, English, and French for kids in other conflict zones.
So it's about providing education where it's otherwise impossible.
That's his argument, that giving children literacy and education is a humanitarian act, regardless of the organization's faith.
A very direct rebuttal.
Okay.
Next up, a critique of the fast-track integration system. This is an analysis by Samuel Sanudag, and it's based on research from the University of the Faroe Islands.
And this piece argues that the system itself might be the biggest barrier to integration for foreigners.
It does. The author points to 4 specific problems. The first is just the long, demotivating wait for permanent residency. It creates this sense of limbo.
You can't put down roots if you don't know if you can stay.
Exactly. The second barrier is the strict 40-hour work week requirement. The argument is that it leaves literally no time or energy for language classes or socializing.
It just traps people in a cycle of work.
Right. The third is the difficulty in getting foreign degrees recognized, so skilled people end up in unskilled jobs. And the fourth is a constant fear that if you lose your job, you're immediately deported.
That sounds incredibly precarious.
It is, and the author's conclusion is quite stark. He says the system treats immigrants as a labor force, not as whole humans, and this creates a parallel society where people just send their earnings abroad instead of building a life and spending here.
A social problem and an economic one. Okay, moving to public health. We have an opinion piece from Sigrid J. Dalsgaard on HPV vaccination.
And this is framed as a pretty urgent call to action with some very stark numbers.
The numbers are really something. For the 2010 cohort, Only 50% of Faroes girls and just 30% of boys are vaccinated. In Denmark, it's 78 and 75%.
Wow, that's a huge gap.
A massive gap. And her argument is twofold. Medically, she stresses the vaccine prevents cancer, cervical, anal, throat cancer. She says the side effects are proven to be rare and mild.
And the second part of her argument.
It's cultural. She basically says the awkwardness around talking about sex, since HPV is sexually transmitted, shouldn't stop parents from protecting their kids from cancer. She says health has to come before embarrassment.
A very direct plea to parents.
It is. Finally, let's turn to the constitutional debate. Borer Østeg Nielsen from the Union Party has written about the push for independence.
This is a direct shot at the national compromise being proposed by other parties. Nielsen's looking at the numbers.
He's putting a price tag on independence.
A very big one. He argues it would cost the Faroes 2.5 billion DKK a year. That's about a third of the entire current budget.
A third. Where does he get that figure from?
A huge chunk of it is defense. He claims NATO membership alone would cost 1.4 billion DKK. And he dismisses the idea of an Iceland solution, being in NATO with no military costs.
He doesn't think that's realistic for the Faroes.
He argues that deal wouldn't be on the table today. So instead of independence, which he says would require massive tax hikes, he's pushing for a new union model. More autonomy, but without what he sees as the crushing financial burden.
So from borders and wages to health and the Constitution, it feels like everything is up for debate at once.
It's a busy time, for sure. All of these big decisions are on the table.
That wraps up our report for this week. Thank you for listening. Like and subscribe to PalsFundamentals for more content like this. Sources linked below.